It's a treatment. I had multiple already here, and then chemo cream on there, and then
I was like, oh, did you have it? I had my husband yesterday.
No, oh my God, it's like it's on fire. I got a constant headache because of cold sore. It's so tender. I've never put anything on Tylenol.
We talked about it already.
Ibuprofen for surgery last week. So I'm in.
Oh, we're running late now, Superintendent. Thank you so much. You guys ready? Sure. Here we go. Good afternoon. I would like to call this monthly meeting of the Oldham County Board of Education to order. It is December 13th, 2021, even though my agenda says 2020. Believe it or not, it's December. And we are at the Arvin Education Center. Our first item of business is to approve an agenda. Superintendent, any corrections or additions, sir?
None at this time.
Motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Dotson, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? And that's 4-0. I would like to ask Ms. Elliott, Michelle Elliott, if you will stand and lead us in the pledge, please. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Before we begin the work of this meeting for the Board of Education, I would like to ask us all to just pause out of a moment of respect for our friends in Western Kentucky. So many lives lost, so much devastation. And so if you will just join me in a moment of silence to recognize the terrible tragedies that have occurred there. Thank you. Thank you all. And I believe, Superintendent, you wanted to add something to this message, sir.
Yes, we have a message going out to our community, our school district, as a coordinated effort, how our schools, our staff, and community can support the communities in Western Kentucky that you just mentioned. So lots of need that currently exists for sure.
Thank you, sir. Let's move along with our instructional session, Superintendent.
Sure, I'd like to call Dr. Dylan Smith to come forward and share with the board our comprehensive district improvement plan.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's very nice to be here. Each year we get the opportunity to look at our roadmap moving forward for how to address the needs of learners in our district. Our school improvement plan, or our district improvement plan this year, falls into the same 7 categories that it has in the past. I'll walk you through that and also just kind of point out some of the highlights for our activities. Each board member, you have a copy of the plan right here. It goes into lots of detail. I'm not going to be getting into that level of detail tonight, but I will be happy to answer questions should you have them once we get through each of the sections. So here are the 7 sections that we've seen. These are the same ones that we looked at in the last school year. We'll start with proficiency goals. Now, when we look at measures of student proficiency, we're accustomed to seeing the phrase K-Prep thrown all around. This year, our students are going to be taking a new assessment from the state, which is called the Kentucky Summative Assessment. So we're going to start referencing KSA instead of K-Prep. I just want to put that up there so that we're all clear on why we kept referencing Kentucky Summative Assessments instead of the K-Prep assessment itself. Now, we brought a number of people together to help think through and craft the goals and the activities that we've developed for our CDIP. And you'll notice that we look at our spring of 2019 and we project forward to the spring of 2024. There's an important reason for that. The spring of 2019 was the last time we took a comprehensive state assessment. That was the same number of days as it had been in the previous 10 school years, for example. In the spring of 2020, we did not take an assessment, and in the spring of 2021, we took an abbreviated assessment. So we're not really looking at trends that include the spring of 2021 data. But down the side, where you have objectives listed, right here, you can see the numbers that we're focusing on for the spring of this year when we take the KSA this spring. All right, so to begin with, in reading, in the spring of 2019 in elementary and middle school, we saw a proficiency level of 66% for elementary and 73.6% for middle school. As we project forward, and this is looking at data from the previous 10 administrations of the assessment, we projected forward using a forecasting tool that was provided to us and that we learned how to use. And we set goals of 70% proficiency and 75% proficiency in reading by spring of 2024, and in math we set goals of 70% proficiency. I think an important thing for us to remember is that we take our MAP assessment in the fall, winter, and spring, and when we come back in January after the winter break, we'll get an update on how students have done from the fall to the winter on that assessment. So we'll get to see a trajectory of student learning and what the direction we're moving as a school district. One other thing that I think would be helpful would be for us to revisit these, our students' performance in the spring of this year, so once they sit for the KSA, and then to also look at our MAP data and see this school year if we're making the kinds of growth that we're looking to make. Now, we had three big initiatives or activities that we looked to this year for proficiency in reading and math. The first is a broad topic that we would call learning recovery. Learning recovery, or you'll hear Dr. Radford reference, recovery in the core is a process, not a plan, where you focus on essential standards in our classrooms. Really, it's supporting teachers as they pre-assess and understand the key skills that students are bringing to class and have the flexibility to adjust their teaching practices to meet those needs should they have students that present with a gap due to interrupted education in the previous 2 years. So our learning recovery process is one that we've talked with instructional coaches about, we have made reference, we've worked with and talked with our principals about, but there'll be more work and you'll hear a lot more about this as we get into the spring and into the summer of the coming year. Next is an instructional framework, and if you think back to the work we did with Ockley or with 21A, this is trying to develop common language to describe the teaching practices that we see going on in our schools. We want to have common language so that when we visit classrooms, we're talking about the same thing that we're identifying in classroom instruction. And finally, data analysis, which is not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but how do we look at data and take action on the data based on multiple data sources. Not just one assessment as a standalone item, but how do we look at data from a lot of different directions. So this is the big work of goal number 1. For goal number 2, for our separate academic indicators, we identified both writing and science as areas that we wanted to focus. So you can see our writing scores from the spring of 2019 and how we projected those forward. And based on our district's writing plan, we had 3 activities. The first was to look at our formative assessments and make sure that we were giving teachers the right tools to teach writing in their classrooms. That's looking at the kinds of prompts that we make available to them and also exemplar essays. Not just excellent pieces of writing, but writing across a whole range of levels so that students and teachers can learn about how to approach the art of writing using those assessment tools. We also believe that support should come at the building level. And so working with our instructional coaches, gathering classroom exemplars for building level calibration and professional learning, and then finally broadly looking at our scoring rubrics. So we don't just give people rubrics and hope that they understand how to unpack them or make sense of them, but rather we have some intentional professional learning focused on writing. Okay. In the area of science, we recognize that this, like math over the last couple of years, is a place where we have a lot of room for improvement. For us, we were looking at 2 specific areas, and there's a few more that are outlined in the CDIP document that you have. But one really key lever, we believe, is professional learning on the inquiry components of the KAS assessment. And so what that would mean is that when Our science assessment changed a few years back. The types of questions that students were presented with changed also. They didn't focus just on content knowledge, but they provided students with a data set or a lab report or some other things and asked them to make sense of those items as scientists. And so we believe there's an opportunity around professional learning there, and then also a focus on differentiation strategies in science classrooms. That's to support both students who have struggled in their science learning, but also to help students who are really ready to push their learning upward, and how we can differentiate upward to support students that have a natural love of science and want to push their learning even further. In goal number 3, we're looking at growth percentiles, and we have focused on conditional growth percentiles for a few years in the past. And just as a reminder, when we look at a conditional growth percentile of 50, this means that the growth was greater than 50% of similar grade levels in the whole, across the country. So for us, we would like to see schools reaching a conditional growth percentile of 50, but really our goal would be 60, a percentile of 60. And that would mean that they're growing more than just the average school would be growing. We had 2 activities that were listed here. One was to focus on the conditional growth percentiles, but look at them by subgroup, not just as all of our students as a whole, so we could understand how different subgroups of students were performing, and then also to give some support to schools on how they adjust classroom instruction based on the MAP data that they receive. One of the things that came up in a few recent conversations is that we have an opportunity to do more training and offer more support on how to support teachers making sense of the MAP data that they're looking at. In goal area number 4, we are looking at our achievement gap goal, and this is, for us, we were focusing specifically on students with disabilities. Now, we approach this through our approach is through novice reduction. So in the spring of 2019, what you see is the percentage of students that fell into the novice range when they took the K-Prep assessment. And what we're trying to do is shrink the number of students that are in the novice range, which then supports their growth across all the other levels. So we're looking for reading. You can see the scores that we have here, and also for math. We have a real opportunity to decrease the number of students that fall in the novice range. Now, working with Ms. Whitaker and her team, we had a couple of activities that we thought we could focus on. Our first would be looking at ongoing job-embedded professional learning around literacy and math skills for ECS teachers. They are the ones that are on the front line working with students in class each day, and we think there's an opportunity to support them. We also have focused a lot on co-teaching, and we think that there's an opportunity in co-planning and also in instructional delivery to help support co-teachers, ECS teachers and the co-teachers that they plan with to meet the needs of kids in their classroom. And then finally, we want to look at the assessment data that's coming and help schools make instructional adjustments based on the data that they see. Goal number 5 was looking at transition readiness, and you can see our transition readiness numbers for all students. These are the numbers that we are focusing on for the spring of this year, but we've also broken out a couple of subgroups of students that have underperformed their peer group. And so we can see African American, Hispanic, and ECS students as those that have the transition readiness numbers you see in 2019, and then the goals that we've set for them for 2022. Now, when we think of transition readiness, one of the areas that we believe we can focus is actually on supporting 8th grade students. We think that 8th grade students don't necessarily know the pathways that are in front of them and how to reach all of the benchmarks to be transition ready when they graduate. I also have a document that I can share with you that breaks this down in a really easy to understand way. I'd be happy to give that to you when this presentation is over. And then as students make their way through high school, we think there's also an opportunity to make sure that the progress that they're making in these areas and the feedback that they receive is communicated to them in a really easy to understand way. And then working with counselors, we can see those same subgroups of students I was talking about a moment ago. We could provide more targeted support to help them reach the goals that we've set for this coming year. Goal number 6 is around our graduation rate. And you can see for all students, our graduation rate in 2019 was 96.1%. We had set a goal by 2024 to hit 97.5, and again, with some specific subgroups of students, we've set individual goals for those levels. For us, we're thinking about the support that we can give them in terms of scheduling and advising work with counselors. And then we also see a real opportunity with our early warning data, which is something that comes out of Infinite Campus. It gives you early warning indicators when students begin to trend in a direction that could be problematic around academic performance, attendance, their stability at home, their behavior data, and other things. That's something we can work with counselors to look at and make sense of. And then our last area is around behavior and mental health supports. And as soon as I'm finished with this slide deck, Ms. Abernathy is going to come up. She's my counterpart this evening, and she'll be able to go into quite a bit more detail on the work that her and her team are doing around social, emotional, and mental health needs of our district. In the CDIP document, three of the things we wanted to highlight were the instructional supports around social, emotional, and mental health, starting in preschool and going through high school. We had trauma teams that are developed at each school and how we're integrating the trauma-informed practices that they are learning about and sharing with their buildings into our classrooms. And then finally, our evidence-based practice grid, which Ms. Abernathy can speak to in more detail. I'm going to pause right there and see if you had any specific questions on any of these goals or activities that I could answer for you.
Let me ask Dr. Smith, any questions or comments, board members? Mr. Kehoe.
I have a couple, I guess.
Sure.
Maybe one. Your indicators for item number 2 go to...
Science and writing?
Yeah, so it looks like spring of 2019 for middle school is 38.4.
Yep.
We're only wanting to push the level up to 43% by 2024. What produces that final number of our
That's a great question.
our goal that we want to set?
So we use a forecasting tool that looks at our assessment data from the previous, I had entered in data from the previous 10 years. And as it looked at the trend in the data over those 10 years, it forecast a range of possible scores. Now, I wouldn't say that we wouldn't like to exceed that. I think we want to grow our students as learners in science much further than that. We just projected that out based on the forecasting tool that we used.
And does this tool use any type of COVID considerations in there, the drop in?
I think that we look at those COVID considerations, and I think we also look at the change in the assessment as it has changed from where we were in 2011 or 2012 to where we are today. And so while it doesn't specifically adjust for COVID, but we recognize that our science scores have lagged in the last couple of years, and it's an opportunity for us to get better.
And again, I guess what sticks out to me is this projection for middle school writing. It's 42% in 2022, and I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Should have been looking at the science.
Yeah, middle school writing, compared to elementary school or high school, which were in the 70s, middle school being in the low 50s that is one goal. I would not say it's the ceiling. That would be the floor that we're shooting for.
It just seems those levels are low. I mean, to me, I would want to see a higher,
Yep.
you know.
And one thing that I had mentioned earlier in my presentation is, I think it would be valuable for us to see if we're on, let's get to the spring of this year and see if we've closed that gap further and then adjust the numbers further. I would treat this as a living document and not static. So as we get new information, my goal would be to come in and update this and then make that updated version available and just code it so that everyone knows we had an initial version for this year and we've updated it based on new numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. I think that we have to consider our starting points with any of these scores, and then you just numerically calculate where we need to go, Mr. Kehoe. So the starting points are undeniable.
But where do you start your starting point? I mean, how long have we been doing this?
True, but those are our starting points. Do you have more for us, Dr. Smith, or we're going to transition?
We're going to transition to Ms. Abernathy.
I do want to thank you and your team. This is an outstanding document. As you said, it's a living document. The goals are so comprehensive, and we needed to add to our goals as a result of the last 2 years that we have found ourselves in. So I certainly applaud you for the work that you've done to this point to give us a document that can guide the work.
Excellent, thank you.
Anything to add? Super.
Yeah, and I would just share with the board that to complement what Dr. Smith has shared in terms of instruction and focus and goals, we've also really tried to balance, because this has been a very hard year for our staff. As you look at, recently we engaged conversation with our principals across our district of how we could just, how we're doing at the midpoint of the year, if you will, and how we might could adjust, such as concern, and be very transparent with our board that if you look at our job vacancy list that we have across the district support staff and from a certified perspective, you know, we engaged and sat here in June and July and looking at how we can keep the very best for our students and for our staff and for our schools and for our community. So how we can adjust but still be able to move forward. Things take us a little bit more time, but we want to try to continue to have that focus. So we've been working through that. We're going to continue that as we come back from Christmas break. And what I mean specifically are the supports that we have in place to help us be able to have that balance, because it's been very challenging for our teachers and for our staff. Certainly we've had school open every day, and that's something that we're very proud of, and we want to continue that, but we also have to, and what I mean by go slowly, go fast, with a focus collectively as a school system.
Thank you, Superintendent. Shall we welcome Ms. Abernathy? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am going to be with you a short time. I have brought a team of experts with me that are going to be able to share much more than I can. So if you'll notice in the front row, we have our mental health consultants and school social workers. Jill Canuel, Renee Grady, Sarah Adams, Brian Troyer, Chelsea Graves, LaRonda Davis, and Josh McMinn.
Excellent.
So I'm going to do a brief opening and turn it over to them.
Excellent.
Over the past number of years, we have worked exhaustively to look at how we support the mental health of our students in our community. That spans back 6-7 years. The past 2 years have been incredibly difficult for our staff in supporting student mental health, our students, our families, and we are not resting on the good things that we have done. Before they come up, I have to give kudos to this team. They will not settle for this is what we have done in the past. They are constantly looking at where our schools needs right now, how do we support our students, and how do we stretch ourselves to do that, which is why we felt tonight it was very important for you to see a snapshot of where our schools are right now with some areas of mental health, so that then we can talk about some of the things that we're doing and some of the things that we're looking to in the future. The one umbrella piece that Dr. Smith mentioned is that all of our schools provide instruction for students starting with preschool kids that are 3 years old all the way up to our seniors on social emotional practices that help students be in charge of their own mental health and wellness. Our school counseling services are the first line of defense when we have a student who is struggling, and they are incredibly responsive. We have worked very hard, our principals have worked very hard with our counselors over the last several years to really focus their time, effort, and energy during the school day on supporting students through counseling services. They do classroom guidance, they do counseling groups for small students who are struggling with similar things. They do individual counseling, and then they also do staff consultation. So while they have special training in how to address the social emotional needs of students, they share that wealth with staff members on a daily basis. And so they are that first line of offense, but then one of our counselors said, and I think he said it very well, I'm the general practitioner. When it comes to something very heavy that a child needs help with, we need to call in our specialists. And that is the team of people that you're getting ready to hear from. Our mental health consultants and school social workers provide 2 very separate programs to help support the mental health needs of our students in this district. So Renee Grady is going to serve as the spokesperson for the mental health team, and you'll hear from her first.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Abernathy. Yes, Mr. Dodson.
Ms. Abernathy, you mentioned students. Do they also, if a teacher or somebody has problems, work with them too?
We have done that on a very limited basis in the past. We do have programs for staff that they can access, but that is one of the things, given how our world has changed and how our staff needs so much support right now, that team has been working on a proposal to bring to principals and to Dr. Radford on how could they be more effectively used to support our staff, and that will be rolled out in January.
Thank you.
Okay, I should have asked if you had questions
Thank
before I
you.
sprinted off. Are there other questions
All
before I
right,
bring Renee
Melissa.
up?
Thank you. I do want to remind all of us as we transition here for a second, I'm glad that you mentioned that the work in this area began 6 or 7 years ago, but did escalate over the last couple of years, I believe. And I want to thank this Board of Education because with the leadership of the central office, this board did make the decision to be able to fund additional mental health consultants and social workers to support our students and to relieve school counselors somewhat. So I really want to thank this board for recognizing the need in this district. We are fortunate to have been able to set aside that money to be able to do that. Welcome.
Thank you. Absolutely. Again, I'm Renee Grady, and I've been with the district for 5 school years now, and so excited to get to tell you guys a little bit about how we've been able to grow with the addition of the additional mental health consultants. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what's going on. We wanted to start with sharing a little bit about what we do during suicide prevention, just because that is typically the very beginning of our year. And while it is very intense, it also gives us an opportunity to get students on our radars immediately that are going to be needing our services and supports and stuff right from the very beginning. So even though it's a very intense beginning to the year, it's a great opportunity for us to get supports and stuff in place. We are currently, this is some of the data from this school year with the amount of students that we met with. The red shows the students that on our exit slips marked that they were having current ideation and that we were able to meet with immediately that day and provide support, whether it be a mental health evaluation, safety planning, whatever kinds of things that they needed, and get in contact with their parents. Any student that we meet with, we also contact their parents that day to let them know what is going on so that we can do as wraparound support as what we can. The yellow indicates the students that were having recent ideation or were having some mental health issues that could potentially indicate that they were having some mental illness. And then the green were students that had indicated that they needed to talk to somebody further, but it wasn't necessarily an emergency. It was about themselves and something that they were dealing with, or potentially about a peer that they were concerned about. And any of the students that identified a peer, we also followed up with them and phone calls to the parents as well. So just so you know as well, this data does represent a good amount of the student population, but it is on par with what the national surveys on mental health needs and suicidal ideation, it is on par with all of that as well.
Can I ask a question?
Hold on, okay.
Another portion, and we will be continuing to evaluate, making sure that we're using the best evidence-based practice for our suicide prevention. We don't want to just continue to do a program because it's what we've always done. We are constantly evaluating, so we'll have to let you know what program for sure we use next year, but that is where we're at with that. We wanted to let you know a little bit more about the relays that we respond to. Oldham County has a system in place that during the school day from 8 to 4, we monitor if a student types into a device about suicide, killing themselves, anything like that. We get a computer notification with a screenshot of what that student typed in, and we're able to follow up within minutes. We have a protocol written that the mental health consultants, and then Melissa Abernathy also gets the notifications. And we are able to determine what school the student is at, what supports they may need, and using our best clinical judgment, what kind of follow-up they need. And based on that, we've been able to get some mental health evaluations. Some students have ended up with hospitalizations. Others, we've been able to do some safety planning or contact their parents. And a lot of times parents are like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm so grateful for this information. We have not had anybody angry or upset with us that we're monitoring. Some questions about like, how did this happen and what's going on? And then we're able to explain the system. But I feel like this has been able to make a great impact on student safety and doing what we can. And any relays that happen overnight, not in that portion or during the school breaks, we have a protocol for how we follow up with that as well the very next day. Wanted to let you know a little bit more too about our direct role within the schools. We
as Ms. Abernathy was talking about, we constantly want to be growing and developing and not just doing what we're always doing. So we've been taking a lot of data this year on how we're spending our time to make sure that we're doing it as it's needed and based on what the needs of our schools are expressing, that we're meeting those and not just doing what we've always done. So we've noticed a definite increase in our direct services, and a lot of that is because we are more available to our schools now with more of us, and so we're able to meet with students, and that may be through crisis situations, or it may be one-on-one, trying to supplement until a student is able to see their counselor, or a lot of times because we are collaborating constantly with their primary therapist, just to help them get some coaching on what coping strategies they're using in their sessions, or giving information to that outside therapist on this happened at school, the student may need to process that in their next therapy session. We do a lot of consultation with counselors, teachers, administrators to be able to provide supports on the safety of kids, on what their mental health needs are, just to provide that mental health lens too of this student may be having this behavior, but there's more going on, and trying to help them understand that. And then the third number on there is to represent the amount of family contact and support that we provide to those families, whether it be through referrals or coaching them through a situation, getting them connected to the resources that they need. We do a lot of that as well. Some other activities, just as example, our Kid Talks are, depending on what the need of the school is, weekly, bi-weekly, where we get together with the counselors and any other staff that are wanting to participate in that, where we can kind of talk through different student situations and provide, whether it be advice to the counselors, or affirmations of, yes, you are on track, this is good work that you're doing with the student, and trying to work through that. We consult with the staff to help them know what to do with different students in their classrooms, especially those high-need students that may have some self-harm ideation or something like that going on. And then we've been able to provide a lot of trainings. We've been able to do some different policy work with the district, and obviously providing supports for any kind of crises, whether that is a district-wide situation where we've all been able to come together and support a specific school with what's going on, or if it's an individual situation where a student has had something major going on and needs some support directly from one of us. One specific example, there was a student in the district that this last year required a lot of mental health supports to be able to stay engaged in their extracurricular activities. The mental health consultant working with that student was able to collaborate a lot with their outside provider, met with that student regularly, coached the teachers, worked with the extracurricular directors, and now this student is able to go about a normal school day and participate in activities without the amount of increased support that they did require. So that was really exciting for us as a team to just see, hey, we've made a big difference in this particular student's life. One of the last things that I wanted to talk about, that we wanted to share as a team, was just about, we do get a lot of externalizing behavior, but a lot of internalizing behavior, because it's hard to always recognize those students that are quiet and withdrawing, and so we do a lot of consulting on that, as well as externalizing, and then the crises. We have coordinated more than 90 mental health evaluations this year. That may be a mobile assessment, it may be coordinating with an outside provider of, can you see this student today? For suicidal ideation, self-harm, any of that kind of stuff, but we have also been able to prevent a lot of evaluations from happening just simply by knowing the families, knowing the providers in the community, being able to safety plan, and being able to work with those families. So as excited as we are about the difference we're able to make in those crisis situations, we're very happy about the prevention that we're able to do as well. Any questions?
Great report, Ms. Grady. In spite of the subject matter, Mr. Dodson.
Yeah, the chart you had up there of
Yeah.
suicide between the middle and high school, one thing I saw was left out, and I'm hoping for a good reason. Elementary. Do you ever get any calls on the elementary related to that?
We most definitely do. That chart was to represent our suicide prevention program that we have to do by September 15th, but we have a tool, the Columbia Suicide Severity and Rating Scale, that we use, that there's an elementary school version as well, and I don't have specific numbers for the district-wide on what we've done with that, but yes, we most definitely get calls on that. More often for 4th and 5th grade, but it's not completely unusual for kindergarten through 3rd to have some situations where we've had to help with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grady.
Thank you.
That's alarming.
Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So we are the two district social workers representing the wraparound program here in Oldham County. I'm LaRonda Davis.
I'm Chelsea Graves.
So Oldham County Schools employs 2 social workers to facilitate wraparound program to support students and families in need of intensive support services. The goal of our program is to provide an intense level of support by partnering with family and their support systems to ensure success for a student in academic, social, emotional, and behavior areas of education. Basically, we are bridging the gap between parents and the schools. As you heard throughout the evening, returning back to school has been a struggle for many students, and now more than ever, we just feel that students are needing additional supports to assist them, to motivate them, and encourage them to be in school. Currently, we are in 8 different schools in the district. I serve the South Campus, Camden, Crestwood, South Oldham Middle, South Oldham High, and Chelsea serves the Central Campus, Centerfield, LaGrange, Oldham County Middle, and Oldham County High School.
We wanted to highlight a little bit about the wraparound program. We are our school social workers, and we definitely provide a layer of school social work service to our whole district, but our intentional program, our case management program, is called Wraparound. And we wanted to highlight a little bit of the difference between those 2 services and what we offer to our schools. The wraparound program, as LaRonda talked about, serves as us as the wraparound facilitator supporting a targeted caseload of students and families. These are students that have been identified having significant barriers that impact their success in school. And to do that, some of the things to address those needs, some of the things that we do are listed here. One of the main things that we do is assemble a team of support around those students. That team comes from people, when we meet with a parent, that they identify as support, and we also discuss gap areas where support is needed, and we create what's called their service team, their family team. Sometimes what that looks like is also bringing people to that team and saying that this is something that could help this student. A lot of times that includes resource referrals. So we try to keep a pretty good pulse on what resources are available in our community to address a wide variety of needs. A lot of that does tend to be mental health needs, and we often invite those people to be part of a wraparound team for a student. That starts with parent contact, of course. We spend a lot of our time speaking with parents via phone, text, email, meeting them at work. LaRonda has one client specifically she sees at her job often because that's just what's easiest for her. We do home visits when those are needed, trying to kind of meet parents where they are, build rapport with them, and get some buy-in into their children's education and get them to feel supported and communicative with their school teams. We also build a lot of relationship with the students on our caseloads, and we do that by observations, being in their classrooms, being at school, joining groups that they're in, helping lead those groups, and just being there for them and being another point person, getting to know them and their needs, and advocating for them at school. We facilitate a lot of responsive meetings as needs arise too. So sometimes we have a child that has on our caseload that there are just a lot of problems floating around and discussion around those problems, and so we create like a problem-solving meeting where we facilitate the meeting, we have goals at hand, and we leave knowing what are some actionable items that we're going to have as a team to support this student and move them along. And then our service team meetings, which I mentioned first, are kind of the bulk of our job. They take a lot of planning and preparation. We try to have those every month or every couple of months based on the level of need for that student. I just participated in one at Centerfield before I was here, where we're just kind of really brainstorming some solutions for a student. And that specific type of meeting, though, if we're bringing in the child and the family, we'll have them there as well, and we'll prep them before that meeting so they know what to expect. Typically, for elementary kiddos, we don't always invite them to those meetings. It can be a little overwhelming with a lot of grown-ups talking about your needs, but we definitely, for our secondary level kids, involve them in their team meetings and get a lot of their input about what they want to talk about. Other things that we participate in when available, and we're each at 4 different schools, are ARC meetings for our students, behavior meetings. Unfortunately, we do have to participate in some reentry meetings for those students, or transition meetings, whatever it might be. And those are all just based on our targeted caseload. You did get, I think, a 1-page information from Ms. Abernathy that talks about our average caseload. And an average caseload is usually about 20 to 25 cases. And a case services a whole family unit. So it's very common for us to have maybe 3 or 4 Oldham County students in a family. And so that puts us up into the 40s usually for caseloads that we follow up on. Target students, the students that we get referrals on, we definitely provide probably a more intensive level of support for those students, but we're also available to support siblings that are in that household as well. That's kind of about our wraparound program. Social work related, we definitely want to provide as much support as we can to the entire school community and district, just to make it easier for families to access resources. And to do that, one of the things that we've done that has been super impactful for us is we do go to monthly meetings for the Coalition for a Healthy Oldham County. They actually just invited me to be a board of director member, which I thought was awesome, just to have some school buy-in. And LaRonda serves as a member of an FRC advisory council here, just to bring in some additional resources for our school district. We did create a community resource guide, and we disseminated that school-wide and within the community. So they do use that at some of the community meetings as well. We're available consultatively to meet needs of families across the whole school district. And I think this school year alone, every school in the district has accessed us in some capacity, whether it's like holiday time, food resources, homelessness. I think a lot of the counselors tend to be the people from the other schools that will reach out to us to consultatively support other families that are not in our target schools.
I was going to say, and sometimes on our caseload, our targeted student may have a sibling that attends another school that is not a part of the program. So that's how we also end up working with other schools in the district.
Yeah, that tends to happen for me a lot with like East Oldham and things of that nature. We do participate in any district-wide mental health initiatives. We are with mental health consultants often, trying to support them in any initiatives they have district-wide. One of the things we've been lucky enough to get to do this year is also take on mentors at some of the other schools, or at our schools that are maybe not students on our caseload. I feel like that has helped us really build into the school culture at our schools and be available to the staff and get to know more of the staff as well. The weekly meetings that Renee was mentioning that the mental health consultants attend, we try to attend those as well. Kid Talks. I was recently invited to be part of MTSS at the high school. LaRonda does some additional meetings at her schools as well. And then we spoke to the mental health consultant team meeting.
So the last slide here just basically talks about some of the wraparound program successes that we've had. The wraparound program impacts the family and the student by stabilizing that family and improving the school experience for the student. Stabilization of that family can look like increased communication with the school, consistency with outside providers as far as making appointments and being regular with their whatever service that they're getting from the outside providers, improved organizational skills for the student and for the parent, develop skill set to manage needs of the child, advocacy for the child. Parents learn how to effectively advocate for their child. Even when they're attending meetings, sometimes parents can be upset or just talking to them about different communication styles, being more assertive so that your voice can be heard throughout the meetings we attend. Also, we improve the school experience for a student, and that can look like just improve attendance, decrease in behavior referrals, increase participation at the school, as far as just coming to school, going to class, doing the work, building connections with peers and staff, and developing tools to manage their stress. These are some of the things that help the student within the school. Chelsea and I worked on a survey that went out to some of our staff, parents, and community partners. And so these are some of the testimonies that we received after reviewing the survey. At LaGrange Elementary, a parent there said, Ms. Parham, which is Chelsea here, Ms. Parham and the wraparound team she assembled to assist my family did a phenomenal job in creating a plan specific to my family's needs and executing the plan without flaw. That's a parent's testimony. A school counselor from the Central Campus said that this program is a huge asset to our families and bridges the gap between home, school, and community. Thank you for your hard work. Staff from the South Campus said Ms. Davis is doing a tremendous job meeting with our students that need her assistance. She is consistent with the attendance and students ask for her by name. She is making an impact in the lives of students as well as the lives of staff. We are fortunate to have her as a part of our guidance team. Just love her. So one of our, and then also with our community partners, again, because we did survey them as well, because we're working closely with them as they're providing services to our students. This is an Impact Plus worker that works from 7 counties. She said, I would love for families to have access to this program no matter which school their child attends, especially if one sibling attends a school that a wraparound coordinator services and the other siblings does not, which is what we had talked about earlier. I understand that there are only 2 positions at this time, but it is such a wonderful opportunity for families that otherwise fall through the cracks if they are not receiving services elsewhere.
Wow.
And on a positive note.
Yes, we appreciate that, Ms. Parman and Ms. Davis. Let me pause and ask if there are any questions or comments. Mr. Dodson?
I hate people, this is interesting to me.
Sure.
On this wraparound program, it seems tremendous. The only thing that concerns me, we got 8 schools, and there's a lot more schools out there that may need that. What do you do if, say, Kenwood Station calls, and we got a family that needs this wraparound program? Do y'all pull them in, or?
Well, we do actually, because I have a student that attends a high school, and she has a sibling that attends Kenwood. And so in talking to the mom, I was asking her, how else can I be of a service to her? And she said, well, I'm having some issues with my daughter, Kenwood. She didn't feel as if the IEP was being followed properly or whatever, so she left the meeting not feeling that her child was being served the way she wanted her to be served. So I then put together a team, spoke with Renee Grady, who I believe also works at Kenwood Station, and we talked with the admin there and was able to schedule another team meeting where the mom was able to kind of address those concerns that she had, and she felt much better, and the teachers was very much on board with understanding what she was feeling and understanding what those needs were for her daughter. And
what about if they don't have a sibling, they're just some child by itself?
So I took on a family at Goshen, which is not one of our schools, and that was after a lot of work from the team already at Goshen. And it seemed like that my support could be short-term. It could be someone to kind of come in and maybe assemble some outside providers, streamline all the work that they were already doing, but they're just in the mix every day. I was able to kind of be an outsider and come in and just lead a couple of meetings, and that student's doing phenomenal now, which is really based on that teacher. So it's just a lot of positive praise to those people that were already doing some of that work. We have been approved to take on some cases when there's flexibility in our caseload, or we will attend a couple of meetings consultatively, build the team up at school, and really help the parent to see who they should be reaching at school. Those supports already exist. It's just a matter of the avenue to connecting with them and contacting them. So a lot of times we can maybe get in quickly and add in some layer of support and transition back out, where at our schools we're able to maybe do a little bit more long-term service.
I just want to make sure no one's left out.
And that would be ideal for sure.
The obvious limiting factor is you two, who have 35 to 40 clients, and caseload would most definitely limit your ability to meet all those needs. Our elementary schools do have outstanding school counselors, and we still have our mental health consultants and so forth, but it sounds to me like you all and our new mental health professionals have really dug in to meet the needs of our students, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Abernathy, anything else to add?
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
I think after hearing from them, you can understand why I just went and sat down, because they've got this covered. I just can't be more grateful for the resources we have in this community and for the expertise that we've been able to accumulate to really help our schools start to dive into this. And I think that is the most powerful part of the approach, is everybody has a piece of this. Classroom teachers are involved, counselors, principals, all the way across our schools, and just knowing that together we can do this and that it doesn't fall on one person or one small group of people. I think continuing to be responsive to the needs of our community as we grow and change is so critical, and so we'll keep updating you as things come up. But do you have questions for me before we close?
One statement.
Mr. Dodson.
Every
Yes.
penny we spend on this is worth it, because if it saves one kid,
Amen.
we're good.
Absolutely.
Anything to add, Superintendent?
Yeah, just share with Ms. Abernathy, our mental health consultants and our social workers. I just want to recognize the day-to-day work and talking with principals as day-to-day needs come up. and trying to really respond, as Ms. Abernathy alluded to, in addition to that, to be able to present anecdotally feedback that we've gotten, as you've seen tonight, and just other data points about how we were doing. As you can see, we have lots of needs across our school district, and continue to try to support that the very best we can, and continue to really build a good response system, because we often talk that there's all of our school districts, and Overland County is no different, really how they have a really responsive, comprehensive approach, and certainly we're very challenged, but also you can see there's lots of work that's happening at the school level with our principals and with the team that you've heard from tonight in trying to support every student.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Abernathy. Thank you all for the work you're doing for all of our students. We're going to roll on with our agenda, which means we are ready for the treasurer's report. Superintendent and Ms. Anderson. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So this is the November financial report for you all, and it begins on page 18. In our governmental cash, we began the month with $40,952,000 and ended the month with $84,250,000, almost $4,000. This was our big month for our property tax receipts, and you see under that receipt column we got $55 million that went to the governmental funds. We had 35, almost 36 of that went to the general fund, and then another 14 went to the building fund. If you look in the next section under the bonded construction funds, you can see we have a new line item for East Oldham Middle School and Buckner Elementary renovations. We received our bonding funds, $8.9 million, and have also recorded our year-to-date construction expense at $4.4 million. So we're about halfway through those funds. On the following page, you can see the cash balances by fund, and the biggest change is down there in the construction fund, Fund 360, where we had a very large negative amount under the capital improvements, and that has moved down to the East Oldham Middle. We no longer have such a big credit up there because we have received some cash from the bonding. On the following page, we have our historical comparisons. Our first line item is for our general fund revenue, and you can see some steady increases from fiscal 19 to 22. We've gone from 51 million to 52 million, 54, and to 56. The biggest increases in fiscal 21 where we did receive a rate hike. As we go down a little bit farther, what did I want to bring to your attention here? Let's look at the general fund expenses, 28 million, 29 million, 30 million, and so comparing fiscal 21 to fiscal 22, we're very similar, so that is a good sign at this point in the year. As we look at, I have a couple new line items. Right directly below that, I have a row called salaries as a percentage of expenses. And as we're looking at those, we've got fiscal 19 at 82.6, and then we move to 81.9, 81.2. And this current fiscal year, year-to-date, we're 79.9. So we're certainly favorable to what we have been in the past. But things happen toward the end of the year, and so sometimes that changes, and that's really what that next section is that I wanted to show you. If we look at the very last row on this one, salaries as a percentage of expenses for fiscal 19, we've got 82.9, which tracked pretty closely with the 82.6 for the same time period 3 years ago. And then we got 84.2%, that was our year of our fringe benefit. And then we've got 86.1%. So that is, you're seeing increases on that, but that last year, what really happened by the time we got to the year end, we had pulled out a number of expenses for, we had some money that came into the feds and we moved it to Fund 2. So really that percentage, after we adjust for the expenses that would normally have been in Fund 1 is 84%. So fairly consistent, but on the rise. As we go to the next section, we've got revenue for selected accounts, general property, 39, almost $40 million is our budget. We have 35.5 in there right now, so we're at 89.13 of our budget. The PSC, property and franchise tax, again, seems to be a little bit behind. However, our collections are usually highest in February through April, so we'll keep an eye on that. The bottom three line items, we're about 42% through the year, and so the motor utilities and SEEK program are all right on target. Capital outlays where we expect it, and the building revenue fund, we're up in the high 80s as far as collections on that as well, so expected at this time. On the following page, we've got revenue by account in detail, and then let's see, on page 23, we begin the expenses by category. Let's see what I wanted to bring to your attention on this one. Let's look at page 24. Under property services, you can see our water and sewage account 0411. That is considerably higher than what we had been in the past, and so our energy manager is looking into this to see what's going on there. Two line items below that, we've got garbage service. We're not so far out of line because we do have $9,000 worth of chemical disposals in that line item. If you go to page 28, you can again see our electricity costs are very high compared to prior years. I believe that this was a conscious effort on our part to keep the HVAC running during COVID so that we had better filtration of our air. So we're looking at a $300,000 increase there. Slightly below that, we've got an $80,000 increase in diesel fuel. If we go to supplies, 0650, we've got $150,000 over primarily in SLD. And then if we go down to the interactive flat panel devices, 0652, we are up 503. So that is planned, that's part of the budget on the SLD, so we are on the interactive flat panels, so we were expecting that. And on the final page of this report, under property, you can see we've got quite a bit of activity in here. We've got machinery at $52,000. We've got a dumpster is the primary cost there. Under vehicles, we purchased our VW bus, and we will get reimbursed for a portion of that. I believe it's 50%, but we did need to purchase the bus outright before they will pay us back. We've got the final piece of the KISTA payment, or the KISTA buses. The amount that we received from the government didn't cover the buses in full, so we had $51,000 that we needed to pay on our part. And we also have the super vehicle in there. And then on the following two lines down, we've got about $80,000, and that is our phone system, which we are still finishing off on that one. All right, and then on page 32, we've got our expenses by function. And we've got our bonding potential on page 35, which has not changed. That has the updates from the East Oldham, Middle, and Buckner. Page 36, we've got our balance sheets, and those are by fund. And then page 50, we've got our income statements by fund, and that concludes the treasurer's report.
Excellent. Questions or comments, board members? Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Motion to approve treasurer's report, please, made by Mr. Kehoe, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor, that's 4-0. Would you walk us through bills and claims, please, ma'am?
Yes, bills and claims begin on page 108, and these are a list of the activities since your last board meeting. So we've got 831 invoices and $3.7 million worth of activity. So we had pretty quick turnaround this month, so the volume is down on that. And the following pages give you the detail of the vendors that we have paid. And that concludes bills and claims.
That was easy. Questions or comments, board members, on bills and claims? Motion to approve, please, made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that was 4-0. Welcome, well done, Ms. Anderson. We are ready now to approve one set of board meeting minutes. They were from November 22nd, 2021, the regular board meeting. Corrections, additions, motion to approve, please. Made by Mr. Kehoe and seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? And that's 4-0. Thank you, guys. Superintendent, we are ready for your report regarding personnel actions, sir.
Yeah, just suggest the board take the personnel report under advisement as presented.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, board members, or comments? All right, excellent. So we are ready to approve the consent agenda, and we have items A through G. Your recommendation, Superintendent?
Yes, recommend to approve.
Motion to approve the consent agenda made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor? And that's 4-0. We are ready for Superintendent Report number 1, sir.
Yes, our first superintendent report is to consider report on construction and projects currently happening within the district. Unfortunately, we had a fire alarm take place or go off at one of our schools, and Mr. Bohannon had to go take care of that, so he had to step out from the meeting and just suggest that the board review the report and take it under advisement as presented. He has provided an update on each of the projects with pictures that show what's happening across the district, and has included some additional projects that we hope to begin to take bids on as we look ahead to the spring or summer.
Excellent. We do have that report in our board agenda, so I would also echo the superintendent's remarks. If you will, we'll take the opportunity to review that again and share your questions with Mr. Bohannon. And we are ready for report number 2, sir.
Yes, so the board will see in your packet is my ILP, and it goes over those 7 standards. As we've talked about throughout this first semester or first half of this school year, we have continued to focus on human resources. I would just add that we're continuing to try to work feverishly on how we can support our schools and our districts with support staff. One area of note that is concerned for us is our support staff across our district. Of course, teachers is always we want to have the best staff, but support staff is where we have a large number of vacancies. So we want to continue to try to address that. It's very challenging as you look across at what's happening in our state and our country with worker shortage. Mm-hmm. The other piece I would just highlight with you all is standard number 7, influential leadership. A couple of our board members, Ms. Fletcher and Mr. Dodson, met with some of our representatives today, the speaker, and Representative Jason Lewis. We talked about what's happening in terms of across our state and within our county, and just really try to advocate and have a really productive, we thought, positive conversation with them about what our needs are in Owen County specifically.
Excellent summary, Superintendent. Questions or comments? I am going to take this opportunity to commend Dr. Radford. Board members and I attended the Kentucky School Board Winter Symposium sessions that occurred just a few weeks ago. One of the sessions we are required to repeat over and over has to do with superintendent evaluation. And as you know, this document with the standards was given to us a few years ago by the state. And I was so pleased during the discussions that I was a part of to reflect on how much work our superintendent has already accomplished in the evaluation process itself and providing the data to us, which is really the work that we have asked him to do. And based on questions and comments from members of boards across the state, we are so far down the road compared to some in terms of knowing how to evaluate their superintendent, et cetera, much less get the work done. So I want to thank Dr. Radford for just a yeoman's job since you started here, Superintendent, so thank you. We're ready, sir, for report number 3.
Okay, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board, for those comments. Certainly it takes a team effort, and our team has worked really hard. So I'd like to also share with you legislative updates, which kind of tie right into our conversations today with the Speaker and with one of our representatives that you'll see in your packet. This is some of the outline things that we shared with our folks today in terms of, as a Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, we've tried to prioritize and work with K-groups, as you're all familiar with, the School Board Association, Superintendent Organization, but we really have been advocating to increase funding to SEEK within our county, as you all are aware, such as early learning and all-day kindergarten is to codify that. So we've had all-day funding given to us from the state to our district one time this year, so we're hoping that beginning in this general session that they will make that a permanent fixture, which could be a really big deal. And specifically, our conversation today was also to advocate for funding of transportation. Our district funds or supports transportation about 45% out of our general fund that the state does not provide us. So what that means in dollars and cents is estimated about $3 million that we have to pay annually for transportation. And we're advocating for additional, continue to help us align with what's happening for leadership from the district to school in terms of statute and what's required. You've heard me talk about recruit and retain and provide the best options for us to be able to get the very best teachers and staff for our school system. And then continue that flexibility and allow us the opportunity to, as you heard me mention, not just all-day K, but also preschool, because we know if we can get students on grade level when they leave third grade, that has such an impact on why we even exist as a school system. So that was a focus today, and to be able to have some conversations. I'll also add that we talked to representatives about such things locally as Westport Road, what can be done to support Westport Road. We also talked about additional supports that we as a district could receive to support Arvin Center in terms of, and I see Mr. Watkins there in the back, and I haven't had a chance to really even share that with him, but just to advocate that there's an opportunity for our district to receive additional monies from the state to support the Arvin Center.
Thank you, Superintendent, and I appreciate the fact that you initiated that meeting with the Speaker of the House and Representative Nemes. Let's move along. We are ready for Superintendent Report number 4, sir.
Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Dews to come forward and share an update on COVID-19.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All right, so just want to kind of give updates from where we were at last meeting, just to kind of keep you informed of our 2-week status, and then every Monday status as well on that piece of it. So this was done early this morning, late last night, so it's numbers as of this morning. So we don't have anything in from today yet. But if you look at the screen, there was 43 preschool cases with a 0.79% positivity, 23 middle school and 19 high school. And
Mr. Dews, can you clarify the 43 cases, not just in preschool, but...
Preschool and elementary, yes. In our K through 5 schools, with 43 out of the 54, 33. If you go and look at the daily average cases, you can see where we were in early to middle of September. We got to our low point the beginning of November, and we did see an increase come right back after Thanksgiving break. And that increase has started to decrease slowly from 12.55 cases per day the week right after into last week of 10.6 cases on that. So I'm just trying to show numbers on that piece of it. If you look at the next one, just again looking at the bar graph, you can kind of see if we start back at the beginning of school where we got to the end of October, 1st of November, and then where we're at now, from just a little bit different representation. If you look at our quarantine numbers, we knew it was going to change a little bit because of following the practice and the procedures from when we went from just high schools being unmasked to now high schools, middle schools, elementary, and preschool. We increased from 3 feet to 6 feet, which did increase our numbers. So we got to a peak about the same time as you look at those peak of numbers from the two sides before that, when we were at 12.55 cases on a weekly average, and they're starting to come back down. We still do have two separate ways to get some relief from quarantines. Test to stay is still an option and running and has larger numbers. And then you also, just the vaccination status as well, are multiple ways for people who are quarantined still to stay with in-person instruction. And we've had good numbers of kids going through test to stay to come back and stay in school. So we're still working through that. So we look at the 5 areas that we said we paid close attention to, working with our partners and our team, and then looking at our trend data as well. So the week of last December 13th starting, the state was at 8.97. The OC incident rate was at 47. Had gotten up to like 53 or 55, so it's coming down a little bit. School cases we just talked about is 10.8. The vaccination rate has stayed about the same since the Thanksgiving break, right at about 60%. And then the ICU capacity is at 91.07. So you go back and you kind of look at that compared to the September, or late August, early September numbers, when we had 15.84 state positivity, 44.1 OC incident rate, 20.2 was our high, and then our vaccination was at 54%. So if we go back and look at those numbers, you have that as well.
Yes.
If you look at it by school, this is where it's interesting, and every school has its own story, depending on what's going on in the school and so forth. But we do have 2 schools. You can see are a little bit higher in the elementary and area, and that's Centerfield and Camden. And we did make the decision last week to go mask required at Centerfield due to larger number of cases and it being the factors presented itself that we felt like that school, and talking with the principal and the leadership team there in the district, that we needed to do that at Centerfield through the end of this week. If you look at your middle and high schools, staying pretty good. Butner's a little bit of a different situation just because of the low number of students there. At 2% is really, could be 1 or 2 students only. And then East Oldham has a little bit of increase, but it's actually decreased from where it was a week and a half ago. So we feel like those are looking pretty well, and we'll continue just to monitor those individually by level, and then all the factors that lead into each of those based on the campus, the classroom, family connections, community connections, and all that, as we make those decisions on that piece of it. Just go back to, we're still following these for district level decisions. Our 5 big areas, and then along with the other factors that we talked about. And then that's what we did with Centerfield. We went back and looked at those, and number of positive cases by school, the family connections, the school level exposure of positive cases, large events, suspected school transmission, and monitoring vaccination rates. We took A through E and really used those decisions to decide what to do different there, because Buckner was not that far off at the time, but Buckner had different situations. So we kind of made those decisions, and that's where we're at today.
Nice job, Mr. Deves. Thank you so much. Let me ask if board members have any questions at this time. One question I have that has been posed to us by some community members is the issue of 3 feet versus 6 feet impacting quarantines. Can you speak to that for just a minute, Mr. Deves?
Yeah. So when we were masked, we were allowed to be 3 feet away or less. Had a potential to be quarantined. Anybody outside that 3 feet did not have to be. When you go to the mask optional, it increased to 6 feet. We're only 2.5 weeks from when we first started that, so I can't really, I'm not going to sit here and say data-wise, looking at if 3 or 6 is that piece of it. I think right now I would just say continue to use Test to Stay on that piece of it, and then as we get some more data, we can decide if we want to discuss that further.
But that criteria came to us from...
Yes. So
From the health department?
Yeah, well, it's that, CDC, and, you know, we took all that and tried to make the best decision we could make as a district. You know, it's 6 feet at 30 minutes, so we do have a little bit of room to talk about that and look at that, but we wanted to look at our numbers before you start removing too many mitigation strategies at one time.
Correct, and I would never disagree with that. I just kind of wanted to have the conversation because we did not just make up that criteria ourselves. So I felt the need to kind of press on that a minute. Anything else, board members? Superintendent.
One other thing to add to Ms. Fletcher and what Mr. Dees has said is we've continued to have our layered mitigation strategy. So as we look at what's happening with masks being optional, what's happening with the positivity, that rate that we're seeing in Test to Stay, and how things are progressing to help make some informed decisions about moving forward. And of course, we need to just continue to monitor, as we do every day, what's happening in our schools, what's happening within our county, and so forth.
Greatly appreciate your effort in this world, Mr. Deeves and Mr. Davis. If he were here, I would thank him.
He's working a shot clinic for us right now.
Obviously. Well, thank you, thank you. We are going to take a break. We have recognitions shortly, and we have invited our students and families to join us at 6 p.m. So we will take a quick break for the time being. Thank you all. So we have come to my favorite part of the agenda, which is recognitions again, student recognitions, and we are so happy to have some students here with us this evening. I am going to turn the meeting over to the superintendent and Ms. Nykirk, who's going to assist with our recognitions.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to,
Podium.
okay, I was going to read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a mic down there, Super.
Okay.
New kid in town here. You got to get him trained up. And students, we are going to ask you to stay with us up here. We have 2 schools represented tonight, and we are going to ask you to stay with us up front so we can get a group photograph picture.
Sure.
Certificates are helpful. Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to take a moment and just read a few things about our National Merit semifinalists. Oldham County Schools is proud to announce 8 National Merit semifinalists for 2022. So to our students and to our parents and families who are here, welcome. Each year, the National Merit Scholarship Corporation honors students across the nation whose scores are the highest in the PSAT and other qualifying exams taken in the fall of their junior year. This year, 8 students from Oldham County Schools have been named 2022 National Merit semifinalists. To become a finalist, the semifinalists and their high school must submit a detailed scholarship application, including information about their academic record, participation in school and community activities, demonstrated leadership abilities, employment, and honors and awards received. Additionally, the students must be recommended by a high school official, write an essay, and earn SAT scores that align with the student's earlier performance on the qualifying test. Certainly, it goes without saying that our students deserve the highest level of recognition that we can give them and honor them tonight at our board meeting. Such a lot of work has gone into these semifinalists, and we are so proud of them. So I'd like to announce our semifinalists, and when I do call your name, please come forward, and would like to recognize you with your certificate, and please remain up front, and we'd like to get a group picture. So from North Oldham High School, Taylor Childress. Next from North Oldham High School, Aspen Fane. Next, James Trey Hoyer III. Congratulations. Next from North Oldham High School, Aditi Cohen. Next we have Shamitha Kupala. Next we have James Quentin Proud. And last but not least, from North Oldham High School, we have Satya Bangor. And from South Oldham High School, we have Sam Larson. Hey, congratulations.
Good job, Sam.
And next, we'd just like to get a group photo, if we could, please.
You all. Andrea. This is an amazing accomplishment, ladies and gentlemen, and we wish you all the best in your futures. For our families that joined us for recognitions, I would welcome you to stay for the rest of the board meeting, but I would also give you this opportunity if you feel like you need to have dinner, do homework, anything else you need to do this evening. I would give you that opportunity too.
You sure can clear a room.
Larry, you ready for public expression? Okay. We are ready at this time in our agenda for public expression, and Mr. Dodson is going to read the guidelines for public expression.
The board will designate a portion of the meeting to hear public comment regarding areas under the board's jurisdictions. Persons wishing to speak shall sign in with the registrar and review the policy on making public comment. The board chairperson or designee will read aloud the public expression guidelines. Speakers should register by signing the sign-in sheet upon their arrival. The board will call upon speakers in the order which they signed in. Speakers shall not exceed the time limit allotted by the board. The board will allocate time based on the number of individuals registered to speak. Public criticism of individual staff members and individual board members is prohibited. Concerns about individual staff performance should be addressed with the staff member directly or his or her immediate supervisor or the board chairperson, respectively. Public expression is not a question and answer period. Any question expressed by the speaker will be noted with directives for appropriate administration follow-up. The board, however, reserves the right to respond when appropriate or necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. So what's the pleasure of the board for time limit?
We have 6.
Okay.
3 minutes.
3 minutes will be our time limit, and Mr. Kehoe, will you help Mr. Dodson watch the time? Thank you.
Michelle Elliott.
Good evening.
Good evening. Do I need to scoot closer?
No, yeah, we'll move the mic, Michelle.
That good?
I don't know. Try it.
Testing. I couldn't think of a word. Okay. I'm here this evening to talk about the quarantine policy. I've emailed Dr. Radford a few times over the weekend, and how I feel it's breeding discrimination amongst our children. What I'm referring to is how a child who is exposed to COVID is forced into a quarantine if they have not had the shot. A child who has had the shot is not forced into that same quarantine, granted, no symptoms. I'm only referring to those students who have no symptoms at all. I don't understand how this is a right policy when someone who has had this shot and someone who hasn't can both get and spread COVID. TTS, the test to stay, is not an option for all families. I personally am not going to test my child who is showing no symptoms. I'm not going to do that to him. When, again, there are no symptoms to be had, why am I going to test him for something when there's no symptoms? Contact tracing, of course, in my opinion, should be optional if a parent wants it. We get rid of contact tracing, we can get rid of a lot of this. Our nurses, I've asked our school nurse, how do you do contact tracing? She takes a measuring tape and goes around and measures where these students were. She has to take the word of the students or the teachers who was within these 3 or 6 feet, or whatever it might be. Taking a lot of resources from our nurses and our staff, again, for a healthy child. You talk about how important it is for in-person school, and you're forcing a healthy child to stay home. I do have to say this last week being home with my son has been very enlightening. It was actually a blessing in disguise because I saw some learning gaps that he has. And so I appreciate the time him and I have had this week. I am blessed that I was able to do NTI work with him this week. Not all families can do that, and I understand that. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Good
you.
questions. Thank you, Ms. Elliott.
Agnieszka Summerlin?
Yes, thank you. If I may, I would like to finish my message from last time. It's a message of caution regarding of trusting the government without question as someone who grew up in a communist system. And this is all in the context of what's happening regarding the push to masking and the push and compulsory experimental vaccinations and the boosters that are coming, and all the social division, political media fear-mongering, and the state-fueled dismantling of freedom and democracy. What Christine Anderson, who's a member of European Parliament, says rings true, not just in the European Union 2 days ago when she spoke, but also in the USA. And this is my message too. The vast number of the elected representatives are selling us down the river. Instead of adjusting our concept of what constitutes fully vaccinated, we need to adjust our concept of what constitutes legitimate government. And governments forcing people into compliance are neither legitimate nor democratic by any stretch of the imagination, and it isn't about your health either. Pharmaceutical companies are about as interested in public health as the arms industry is in world peace. Some of you may argue I'm exaggerating, I'm misjudging the government's intentions. Granted, it's a possibility, but are you willing to take the risk? Can you afford this nonchalant attitude? And I don't mean you, just in general. Can one afford this nonchalant attitude towards government considering what we all stand to lose? Others may think, yeah, I kind of see where she's going, where she's coming from, and now my government wouldn't do it. Well, not only would they, because they do. I mean, I grew up with one like that. I'm telling you they're doing it as we speak, and many people see it, while many people do not see it or just deny it. As Heraclit, Greek philosopher living in 5th century BC once said, the truth often evades being recognized due to its utter incredibility. So just because you can't fathom your government having ill meanings towards you doesn't mean it's not true. On the other hand, I'd much rather be wrong than sorry, but it's up to you. You need to decide, we all need to decide what we will do, and we need to keep in mind that whatever decision we make, we will not only make it for ourselves, but also the decision will be made for our children and our children's children. So our decisions today will shape the society our children will live in tomorrow. And those decisions would predetermine whether the children will live in a free democratic society or be subjected to surveilling police state. And these are the words of Christine Anderson 2 days ago, and I totally agree with that message. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Brenda Daisy?
Good evening. Thanks for allowing us the time to give our opinions with our children. I recognize your position as educators. Please recognize our position as parents. We teach our kids not to bully. We teach our kids not to bully. And our children right now are being bullied to get a shot. And that's not what the parents are asking for. It is our choice. Okay, I've written down just a couple of notes literally on my way in the door here, so it's not polished at all, but discriminating to request a non-vaccinated student to test 4 to 5 times a healthy, no symptom student to test 4 to 5 times in a non-health facility, a non-medical facility, when they have no symptoms, they're well, they are a good student, but there's no test required for the vaccinated student who can still spread it. This shows the agenda to push the vaccine. Multiple testing for a young, well child is wrong. At some point, we're going to have to open our eyes and look at these students' immunity. I'm not sure why it's not being done at this point, but choosing medical testing and vaccines should always be a parent's choice, not the school board's choice. I appreciate the hard work that you guys do. I do not want to step into your shoes. I recognize the hours that you all spent. One of my previous careers was in early childhood education, so I do have a passion for it. And the students are important to all of us. I don't think any of us would deny that. So please listen to the parents. Right now, I have a well child, a GATE student, who's crying in a puddle of tears because she can't be at school. What are we going to do?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daisy.
Bridget Ely.
Good evening. Every month we come and we hear about the case numbers, but I wanted to remind everyone that a case is not an infection. A case is a number that is the result of an unreliable test. But we're using this fictitious number to support policies that are not right, that undermine parental oversight of their own children. And one of the things I wanted to mention, back to the masks because it's still ongoing, in 2020 there was a lot of conjecture about the best way to sanitize, but there was no new information in the form of studies that show what household methods, if any, can safely sanitize the masks of dangerous bacteria, yeast, and fungus. Suggestions that I found online and medical articles were electric cookers, microwaves were suggested. An expert at a State University of New York says masks can be disinfected by UVC germicidal radiation or vapor phase hydrogen peroxide. And Healthline.com says that soaking in bleach solution for 4 or 5 minutes, will do the trick. But what's interesting is these high-tech methods. One article says that even in the healthcare setting, those methods should be combined with bleach. So then why do the high-tech methods? So is there in existence a method that will clean these masks of this dangerous bacteria for healthcare workers, let alone kids whose masks may or may not be washed from day to day? And also, as far as using bleach goes, residual bleach can damage the airways, and this was also mentioned in one of the medical articles, so it must be a concern. And there is this concern about sanitizing the masks worn by the consenting adults who work in the medical field. And I'm wondering, where's the concern about the unconsenting, healthy children who are forced to wear the masks on the basis of really unreliable testing? It's very controversial. And I'm wondering also, how is wearing a dirty mask any different from wearing a dirty bandage? Can you imagine, expecting someone to put on a dirty bandage the next day, but we're all nonchalant about it. But they're both biohazards, and it seems like we've forgotten about that. So I guess my question, I know it's not Q&A, I don't expect an answer here, but how can you require masks for children if you cannot guarantee that they are clean, that they are free of bacteria, yeast and fungus? That's on you to say, this is safe, my child. You can wear this with no worries.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay Nickner. Did I get that right?
No, Titchener, it's okay.
Titchener.
Nobody gets it right.
That didn't look like a T.
I was sloppy.
That's all right.
Okay, first I want to just say how appreciative I am for you guys and sticking with, taking the step to go to mask optional. I know you've spent time in the classroom. You all have probably spent time going through the schools, and I know from my own student, the environment has changed. Kids are happy. I hear from parents, their kids are happy to go to school. Unfortunately, the Centerfield kids aren't happy right now, but overall, I appreciate it. And I know a lot of parents appreciate that you stuck with that decision and moved forward. And I do appreciate, even though center field's in Mass right now, that you are looking at it on a school-by-school basis. I think that's wise. Couple of things I wanted to bring up. I know you're consulting, and I'm going to talk about I do believe it is discrimination. I believe our students are all protected under Title IV of the Civil Rights Act to not be discriminated against, and yet the policy around quarantine is very discriminatory. It just is. CDC, Kentucky Department of Health, Oldham County Health Department, the World Health Organization, they have all said students, or not students, people who receive the vaccine can still spread the virus, and yet your policy is only forcing the unvaxxed to quarantine or go through test to stay. And Brent mentioned, Mr. Deeves mentioned, there's two options to avoid quarantine: test to stay or get vaxxed. I would add a third option: change the quarantine policy. It is up to you. You were given that through the special session in September. You were given that power to update that policy however you see fit. And I would just ask that you reconsider the quarantine policies that you have in place. And I also wanted to mention something to you, because you do follow Kentucky Department of Health. There's actually some guidance for the fully vaccinated on their website. And I assume that, well, I know this isn't being suggested under your policy. If they are exposed to someone who is positive, the fully vaccinated should get tested 5 to 7 days after their last exposure. I know that's not happening. They should also wear a mask in a public setting for 14 days after their last exposure. So we have guidance from the Kentucky Department of Health if a fully vaccinated is exposed, and yet we're ignoring that. So we're picking and choosing some of the things, really, in my opinion, to force kids into get a vaccine. And I can tell you, my kids won't get vaccinated. Over my dead body, they're going to get this shot. So why are we only supporting those families who've chosen to get the vaccine, and then we're just pushing the others aside and making their lives harder? Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Paris.
Hi, guys. Thanks again for having public speakers. We appreciate it. And I know that you would ask if you could. Henry is still battling what he's battling. We still don't know exactly what it is. There has been some discussion that he has long COVID. So his days are hard. And he's not displaying with low oxygen. He's displaying with some neurological issues where his heart rate will be at 50 when he's sitting, and when he stands, it can go up to 150. So it's like that, and it's something when he lays down, it hurts to breathe. So he's having some issues like that, and he's had a headache now for 6 weeks. On the top of his head, it's a constant headache. And my generally amiable, happy-go-lucky kid is grumpy and grouchy a lot more often than he ever is in the past. So for him, for school is a problem because he sees he'll cough, and his inhaler doesn't help with this cough that he's got. So he coughs, and he feels like everybody's looking at him like he's sick and like he's got COVID, and so he's feeling that, and I know he's blowing it up. You know how these kids will blow things up, and it's really big to them when it's not really big in the big world. But he feels really tense about it, and it's making him a little bit unhappy. And so I'm taking him to the doctor. He's been doing a neurologist. We've been doing a lot of doctor's visits. And so, to my point, and keep in mind, I agree with everything everyone has said so far tonight, but one of the things I want to also add is we've had a lot of doctor's visits over this, okay? And I'm pretty sure before February, I'm going to use up my 8 parent days. And I don't know how many doctor days I'm allowed, but I think I already have more than 8 doctor days with doctor's notes. So, at least for this child. And I'm just wondering, is there going to be flexibility to parents whose kids are suffering in other ways that don't actually have COVID, but maybe have fallout from COVID, or have some other tertiary response to the whole situation that's going to incur more sick days than they would typically have? So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And then if I have maybe 30 or 40 seconds left, the other thing I wanted to broach, and I wish that the mental health ladies had stayed because their work is so important. I think that there might be a couple missed opportunities to help some of these kids with mental health issues from elementary school all the way up to the high school. one of my kids is doing a project, and it's like a 3 or 4 week project where they're writing and researching about what to do with mental health issues in the schools, but they are put in such a restrictive box for what they can research from. They're not allowed to research from any other sites, only the 3 or 4 sites that the teacher selected in order to do their project. So they feel like they can't really talk about it, they can't really research it, they can't really give answers and opinions that they have and look into what they think and provide that in their work because of the restrictions. And I think that the students, at least the older students, really have some great insights to what can be done with mental health in our school, and I think that it would probably behoove us to listen to them and maybe form kind of a round table of the older students and say, what do you guys think we can do to help, right? Because they're in there, they're in the trenches, they know the things that nobody will tell an adult, right? And they're very lucid in the way they speak about it.
Your time's up.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody who chose to address the Board of Education tonight. We are going to proceed with our agenda, and we have 2 action items. Superintendent, action item H, sir.
Yes, consider approval of the 21-22 Overland County Schools Comprehensive District Improvement Plan.
Yes. So we had this superintendent report earlier. Any questions or comments, board members? All right, your recommendation, sir.
Recommend to approve.
Motion to approve made by Ms. Nykirk, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that's 4-0. Second action item I, please.
Yes, consider approval of the audit report as presented.
Yes, and we again heard this audit report last month, tabled the action so that we would have longer to review it. So any questions or comments at this time? Your recommendation, sir.
Recommend to approve.
Motion to approve made by Mr. Dodson, seconded by Mr. Kehoe. All those in favor? And that's 4-0. Thank you, everybody. At this time, the board needs to go into executive session. Mr. Dodson, will you read the guidelines for executive session, please?
At this time, I need a motion to go in executive session to discuss the following matters. 3 litigation matters pertaining to student injuries, 1 special education matter, an employment claims matter, and a Title IX complaint. The board needs to go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.810 1C to discuss litigation preparation, the public disclosure of which could jeopardize the board's position.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Motion to go into executive session made by Mr. Kehoe, seconded by Ms. Nykirk. All those in favor, and that's 4-0. Thank you all. I better take my pie with me. Somebody just might walk with me.